Hi, everybody. Good morning. We are ready to begin our Parsha class. Um, Last week we studied together Parsha Truma, and this week we are studying Parsha Tetzaveh. So, what I like to do, first of all, I hope you have your coffee this morning. I have mine. Can't have Parsha class without our morning brew. First, I'll give you a quick summary of the Parsha. This summary comes from our friends at Chabad. And here is the summary of this really interesting Parsha. And of course, I will also reference Purim a little bit in the study today because we are just days away from this topsy-turvy holiday. And the two are somewhat connected. So Chabad.org reminds us that the Parsha Tetzaveh means command. And God tells Moses to receive from the children of Israel pure olive oil to feed the everlasting flame. We know that as the Ner Tamid now of the menorah, which Aharon is to kindle each day from evening till morning. Then the Parsha goes on to speak about the priestly garments, the garments that the Kohanim, that the priests would wear in the sanctuary. They would wear a ketonet, a full-length linen tunic, michnasayim, linen breeches, mitznefet, a turban, and they would also wear an avnet, a long sash that was wound around the waist. And just as a side note here, not in the summary, just my observations, for those that have performed the holy ritual of tahara, of ritual purifying of the body of the deceased, the different kind of ritual prayers that we say during the purification, during the washing of the body, we mention these verses when we are dressing the deceased in what's known as the shrouds. We mention these exact words. We mention the ketonet and the michnasayim and the mitznefet. And the idea is that when someone has passed away and we're doing kind of this ritual purification, this ritual cleansing of the body for burial, it's as if they're a high priest. It's as if they are royalty. Anyway, I just think it's an interesting juxtaposition and association, and one that we don't necessarily think about when we're just reading the Parsha literally verse by verse. Okay, back to the summary. The Kohen Gadol, so the high priest, would wear kind of an apron-like garment of blue, purple, and red dyed wool, linen, and gold thread. The high priest would wear a choshen, a breastplate containing the 12 precious stones inscribed with the names of the 12 tribes of Israel. And maybe you've seen that symbol before. The me'il, a cloak of blue wool, and gold bells. And we're going to talk about this for a few moments, and decorative pomegranates on its hem. And then there was a tzitz, a golden plate worn on the forehead bearing the inscription, Holy to God. So much about what the priests would wear. And now I want to highlight some of the themes as to why those particular items were so important. So one piece, as I just kind of indicated, that I think is fascinating are the bells. So I mentioned the various things that the high priest was to wear, the breastplate, the different belts, the turban, and on the priest's coat, which might be a little bit difficult to think about, I want to kind of paint the image for you. The coat was made of this beautiful greenish blue wool, and that alone would be beautiful. But what distinguished this piece of garment were these 72 golden bells. Imagine 72 golden bells and rimonim, pomegranates, golden pomegranates, according to Rashi, according to our medieval commentator. And these pomegranates, these golden pomegranates, according to Rashi, also had like little clappers within them. So they were also kind of like bells within bells. And the Torah goes on to explain to us that Aharon was to wear this coat whenever he would perform a divine service. So you can imagine when he would put on the coat, you could hear Aaron coming before he would even enter the sanctuary. So While we're not told explicitly why the priests would wear the other garments, I think that the reason for the coat is explicit, that Aaron was supposed to hear the bells. But likewise, the Israelites were also supposed to hear when Aaron would begin this holy service. So I want you to think for a moment why? What was so special about the ringing of these bells? I mean, I don't know. They might become kind of annoying if you heard the bells over and over again, but they served a very holy purpose. So Ramban Nachmanides gives an interesting response. He explains that when the bells shook, okay, when Aaron's bells shook on the coat, the sound was analogous to someone knocking on a king's door. Again, when the bells shook, it was almost as if someone was banging or knocking on the king's door, meaning that before Aaron would enter the sanctuary, he would hear the bells and he would remember and kind of proclaim to himself, I am about to do something holy for the divine. I'm about to do something for God. Now that's important because he is the ultimate servant on behalf of the people. But maybe even more important, the Israelites would hear the ringing of the bells and realize Aaron is about to connect with God. I wonder, as Aaron is connecting, is my own behavior worthy of a godly connection? Is my own behavior worthy of God's attention? When I hear those bells, it's a wake-up call, if you will. Hear the bells. Am I proud of what I'm about to do? Am I proud of what I'm doing? So, yes, the bells, in a sense, were a wake-up call for Aharon, but even more so, a wake-up call for every single person who would hear them. So I say this today in 2026, but I'm a little bit sad because I'm not sure if it would be possible today to hear the ringing of the bells. Think about how many sounds infiltrate our lives on a daily, hour by hour, minute by minute basis. You can think about your phones that are almost never turned off, the volume of the television or the radio or the podcasts, music, whatever it may be, traffic, um, our friends, our family, noise just doesn't stop. It is so rare for us to exist in silence, let alone be able to search out kind of that fine tune, that fine sound of a twinkling bell, or at least a bell that reminds us of God's presence. And so the challenge becomes for us, kind of knowing that bells like that no longer exist, is distinguishing between the sounds that we hear on a daily basis and the sounds that we need to hear. Again, our challenge that we learned from the bells on the coat of Aharon is trying to distinguish between the sounds that we hear every single day and the sounds that we need to hear. Think to yourself for just a moment with that challenge. What sounds do you need to hear? Who needs to be paid more attention to? Who needs you to really hear their voice? Perhaps they have felt silence far too long. And then ask yourself, what will help us to hear the bells, to hear the kinds of sounds that remind us of God's presence, the sounds that help us to rectify our behavior? Does prayer help? Could it be putting into our calendar every single day a one-on-one conversation with someone you love? Maybe it's sitting in synagogue. Maybe it's listening to a piece of the service that allows you to refine who you are and just give yourself the gift of being able to hear silence in a different way. We know there's so many different opportunities to do God's work, but the hard part is sifting through the noise and trying to find the holy reminders. So Aaron had the bells. Can we hear our own? So that first shift, that first theme was the idea of the bells and the rimonim. And just another quick theme that I want to touch upon this morning is how we bring light into this world. Because you remember when I was sharing about the summary of the Parsha, the first couple of verses talk about the Nir Tamid. So the Torah portion, starts with the word tetzaveh, that you shall command. Command sounds like mitzvah, right? The children of Israel. A commandment from God to Moses to the Israelites that they should construct a system in which the light of the Nir Tamid, the eternal lamp, is regularly lit. Now, the Or HaHaim, an 18th century commentator, says that the word tetzaveh, you shall command, also means you shall connect. I love that. Not just command, but connect. So the verse can be read as following. As God saying to Moses, you shall connect or join or bond with the children of Israel. The command in this parsha to connect, to feel closer to each other, that's what needs to happen before bringing light into the world. You must connect before the eternal light, before the Nir Tamid is lit. I love this message, that perhaps the only way to bring light into this world is to first foster connection with each other. We can't just say we want it to be a warm, beautiful congregation, or that we're expecting it to be a warm, bright environment for those to enjoy whatever it may be. We have to foster connection for warmth to be produced. So perhaps it's when we learn each other's stories. Maybe it's when we get a chance, as I said before, one-on-one, learn more about each other. But each time we make an effort to join, connect, bond with each other, at least according to the Parsha, that's when the Nir Tamid, that's when the eternal light has a chance to make its presence known. That's when God's light can enter a space. So the final theme that I just want to touch on a little bit is what we wear and when we wear it. We don't have many Torah portions that speak about clothing. And even last night, I went, made the rounds in my house to each kid and trying to figure out what are they going to wear for Purim? Do we have the materials for the costume? And then I realized this isn't exactly a conversation that only takes place before Purim, trying to gather the clothes, but I'm always asking the kids, do you have your uniforms for sports? Or, for my husband or myself, do we have the right suit? Are we going to the dry cleaning? There's always a conversation about the clothes we wear and how those particular clothes prepare us for whatever interaction we're about to have. So what we're told in the Talmud is something really interesting, that if the clothes for the Kohanim did not fit, then the priests weren't fit to be called Kohanim. And I thought this is fascinating. So if their clothes don't fit perfectly, they can't even be called a Kohen. That there's something to be said about clothing fitting in a particular way to meet and match the moment. So the Sefer HaChinuch explains that the clothing of the priests was for the benefit of the Kohen himself. That a person's, that's what he explains why, a person's inner thoughts are influenced by their outer actions, and that the Kohen needed a constant reminder of his holy actions, and the clothing served that purpose. And I understand that, because every time, a little bit differently, but every time I put on a talit, if you will, every time I put on a prayer shawl, I feel like I am, I don't know if it's that I moved to a different environment, to a different spiritual plane, but I certainly feel by putting on a piece of clothing, if you will, because it's a shawl, a prayer shawl, that not only do my actions feel different, but I just feel called upon to enter a different space, a space for prayer, a space for conversation. Sometimes I know I'm being watched, but I also know that I'm entering kind of a different realm with God. I'm sure you feel this way too, in putting on a particular piece of clothing, whether it's clothing itself or a prayer shawl or a kippah. So yes, this particular commentary says that the clothing was for the Kohen themselves, but also the clothing, as we know, serves a purpose for other people. When you see an officer wearing a uniform, you know that that officer or fire person, whatever it may be, has a particular purpose. You understand that there's a task at hand that needs to be done, and clothing allows that. So I think it's interesting that clothing, especially in this society, sometimes we kind of put down the idea that um, this is a society obsessed with fashion. But here the Torah is telling us don't think of it as fashion for the purposes of um, showing off to others, but rather this kind of fashion is supposed to give us a particular spiritual sanctity, to remind us of refining our inner thoughts, and also to remind the outside world that we have a particular purpose to do. So as we kind of enter these days of Purim, this is the a little bit of the Purim connection. I certainly don't expect us to try to attain the same kind of holiness the Kohanim felt when they dressed in their clothing. But I would encourage us, whether it's choosing our Purim costume or whatever, to ask ourselves, how does my clothing, how does my uniform, how does my tailored costume affect and impact my inner thoughts? How does it refine my inner being? And even if it's a silly costume, okay, fine. So, whatever it may be, I'm hopeful that you'll enjoy your reflection because, and just for 2 seconds on Purim is, of course, supposed to be seen as this topsy-turvy holiday, that the beginning story of Purim, the beginning narrative ends in a completely opposite way, which reminds us that this world is just unpredictable. What we think will happen in the morning, by the end of the evening, it may be a completely different narrative or story that you are living out. And so, what I encourage us to think about, whether it's our clothing that helps us understand that, but switching off from the Parsha for a second, is to really strengthen that which is predictable. Our coffee. What can be predictable is the relationships that matter the most, our relationship with God, our relationship with each other, our community, and even our relationship with ourselves. So hold on tight to that which is predictable, that which we can strengthen, and show your love to those different entities in the ways that are most meaningful to you. So I wish you a Shabbat Shalom and a Chag Sameach. Have a wonderful Purim and a beautiful Sabbath. Have a great day, everybody.